Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Leadership Live. My name is Drew B. Harlow, and I'm here with a good friend of mine, Noah Pusey, who is awesome and has a really, really cool product, tool, dashboard, whatever you want to call it. It's called Ripple Analytics, and it's here to revolutionize the way that HR does reviews, annual reviews. Right now, everyone knows that they suck, and so Noah's here to revolutionize that whole industry. Noah, thanks for joining me today, man.
Drew, happy to be here. Always a pleasure to talk shop with a fellow entrepreneur. Really excited to spread the word with your listeners.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. So tell us more about Ripple. What is it, and how'd you get the idea for it?
So let's start with the beginning quickly. Just a brief bio. I am a lawyer. We have that in common, recovering lawyer. And years ago, I used to administer the annual review for firms I worked at, and I used to receive annual reviews from the various partners that I worked for. And in 2014, a very good friend of mine, Derek Hedges, and I got together and we kind of road mapped out, why do we do this process? Why is the annual review so prevalent in organizational process across the board? Private sector, public sector, higher education, they all do it. They're all doing some form of employee evaluation. Some believe they're more dynamic by doing it every 6 months, but really, the human brain only remembers things accurately for 6 to 8 weeks. So what we thought, since we both were in the process of administering our annual reviews to our various people in 2014, we realized it's a flawed process. And so we started to sketch out what we thought might be a solution. And we did a lot of research, and what we found is most companies do the annual review because they've always done it. It's a compliance exercise. It's not really a meaningful process by which you gather, utilize data, objective data. And so we started there. We started with the concept of gathering information more frequently than every 12 months and applying it to, and allowing the people that you're gathering information for to see their data. And that's where, when you mentioned that we have got our dashboard, that's the bread and butter of Ripple. We show every user how they're impacting people they work with and for. Our scoring system is called the Ripple Effect Score, meaning everyone you touch in your professional life and really your personal life 24/7, everybody you interact with has a net impact on that person, and whether it's positive, negative, or somewhere in between. And so we co-founded Ripple. Derek had been diagnosed with stage 4 terminal cancer, unfortunately, and he lost his battle in April of 2015, but we started Ripple in the fall of 2014. And part of the meaningful reason for doing it is Derek was a very dynamic business person. He was head of strategy for a Fortune 500 company in Boston, and he realized the process was flawed, and he wanted to sort of leave something behind for organizations to grow from. And I jumped on the bandwagon, quite frankly, because I believed in the central message that if you're going to spend time, energy, and man hours or person hours on a process, it should be for a reason. And so when we found out that 70% of HR professionals don't think the annual review is an effective way of gathering information, it's not a growth mechanism, we decided to change that. And so we worked with an IO psychologist, Dr. Frank Schipper, and we created a platform that gathers information on a monthly basis. We can do any frequency our clients want. Our sweet spot is monthly, and in terms of participation, because anytime you're gathering data, you want the people giving data to participate. So we have our highest rates of participation with the monthly frequency, and we work with companies to help them cull through the data in terms of what it means for their job, for the individual employee job responsibilities, what it means for their own individual rates of engagement. Part of the difficulty of managing employees is this concept of engagement, and Gallup came through with data most recently showing that engagement had actually fallen for the last 2 years, fallen from 36% of employees are engaged down to 33%. So we drive engagement. Ripple harnesses technology to gather feedback and empower managers and owners to use that feedback to make better decisions, to make data-driven decisions.
Yeah, I love that, man. And so much of what you said resonates with me and resonates with a lot of folks out there, because a couple of things. First of all, that idea of you having an impact on everyone you touch, whether you realize it or not, right, is a huge concept, and it's something that people don't necessarily realize. The butterfly effect, if you will, right? I mean,
Yep.
you smiling at somebody on the street instead of scowling at them might make their day a little bit better, right? And they will now smile at the next person as opposed to scowling at them, right? And
Yep.
that goes on for the rest of the day. But take that and apply it to work, and now you have something where the way you impact everyone else around on your team, outside your team, and the entire organization, and potentially in other organizations as well, is now being able. It's able to be measured, or at least able to be articulated in some way or fashion.
I mean, honestly, that whole butterfly effect is one of the reasons we co-founded Ripple. Was we had both Derek and I had worked long enough in our professional lives to realize that if you had a good week at work, you had a good weekend home with your friends, family. If you had a good month at work and you take a week off to go somewhere and recharge the batteries to go on vacation, you had a better vacation. If you're not stressed as much at work, you're not stressed as stressed in life. And we've all had those horrible Friday afternoons, and it really impacts your weekend. And we've all had those great Fridays when it impacts your weekend the opposite way. It's a positive impact. And and not to oversell it, but it's not just the happiness component. There's real ROI on engagement. Engaged employees are 23% more profitable, 18% more productive. Engaged employees are 81% less likely to call an absent. I mean, those numbers, when I speak with CFOs and COOs, those numbers are real. It's not just the sort of kumbaya kind of, everyone loves each other and everyone wants everyone to succeed. I mean, culture is a real concept. And what we're trying to do is add value to a process that really currently doesn't have a lot of value, that annual review process. And so, it's easy. They're quick surveys, 5 questions per person. So you have a 5-6 person team. They take about 15 seconds to complete. You're talking about less than 2 minutes a month to gather meaningful information about your coworkers. And then managers, crazy concept, can then use that data in their decision making. I always use the stat, but I cringe at using it because everyone knows the stat I'm about to quote. 80% of people quit their managers. They don't quit their jobs. So if we make those managers better at their jobs, making them aware of, solutions to real problems, because the feedback they get from their people shows them sort of a broad path to creating a better environment. How can you argue against that? If that's our goal, if that's the objective of spending hours upon hours of gathering this data, instead of just putting your 360 reports in a box labeled 2022 and putting it in the closet, and then the box for 2023 goes on top of that, and next year's 2024 reviews will be on top of that. I mean, we use technology to trend data over time. You can see how Drew, how Noah, how Nancy, how Susan, how they've interacted with their teammates for years. And you can really help those employees gain self-awareness. One of the components of Ripple is to do a self-survey. So you answer individually the same questions that your teammates are answering about yourself. And then you take those two data sets, and you compare them. And the closer those numbers are together, the overlap means you're self-aware in those areas. And self-awareness is self-aware employees stick around longer, so your retention rates go up. They're a greater positive influence on their coworkers, so their coworkers stick around more. And all of it is sort of under the umbrella of strengthening culture, because if you have better culture, you keep people longer, they're more productive, more effective, and people are happier. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I want to highlight 2 things you said. One is that 80% stat, right? In terms of, and I think it's actually higher. That's in terms of reporting, but 80% people quit their managers, not their jobs. I say that all the time. People don't leave bad jobs; they leave bad leaders, right? And the other thing is you're giving the people. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm coughing like this. The other thing is that you're giving managers tools to be effective managers. What they don't really have those tools a lot of times, right? The annual review is not setting them up for success to build better teams. It's not. It's setting them up for having uncomfortable conversations once a year, because they don't know how to actually highlight back to where, oh yeah, remember 9 months ago when you did that one thing? Well, we're talking about it now instead of talking about it back then.
And right. millennials and Gen Z, the workforce generational changes that are occurring. The millennials and Gen Zers, they don't want feedback, they expect it.
Yes.
They need it.
Yeah.
They thrive on it. I mean, these are the generations that grew up with email and instant messaging and TikTok and Instagram. It used to be when you go on vacation, you'd come back. I mean, when I was a kid, you'd come back, you'd drop the film off at the pharmacy, they develop it, and 2
Yep.
weeks later, you'd have the pictures to share when people came over Friday night for a barbecue. You don't post them on Instagram and Facebook, and they're immediate. It's immediate. That's what they
posed
want.
wrong for that picture was wrong for the rest of your life. You wouldn't get like 16 shots of the same thing. Wait, let's redo that.
Delete.
Yeah.
Yeah. Retake. Yeah. No, and so what we've done is we've pivoted in the last few years to really, look at what the expectations of that workforce, those two generational workforce populations is. And they comprise the millennials and Gen Zers comprise 63% of the domestic workforce right now. So you better be listening to them if you're a leader. If you don't listen to 2/3 of your labor, your employees, then you're missing the boat. We gather information, the big 5 personality traits, that the data can be used across the board in terms of not just in terms of team function, but as we all know, the last few years, hybrid work. One of the personality traits we track is consistency. Another one is cooperation. So when you see Drew's consistency and cooperation numbers are consistent, are pretty much the same, whether he's in the office or working remote. Well, and let's say my numbers are not. Let's say my numbers are all over the place. When we both go to our managers and say we want to work hybrid, the manager, all too often managers and leaders are impacted by what's called unintentional bias, right?
Yeah.
We like the same hobbies. We have kids on the same soccer team. We're from the same state. We root for the same teams. All of these examples of things that really shouldn't matter in the workplace, but tend to unintentionally, it's very important to know that it's unintentional. They unintentionally change the way managers look at their direct reports. So back to the hybrid example, when you go to your manager and say, hey, can I work hybrid or remotely? Your manager is going to look at your data and see that your consistency and cooperation numbers have been the same, whether you work in the office or hybrid. And they're going to say, sure, Drew, you can do it. You're a perfect candidate to do that. I go to my manager and my numbers are all over the place. They're going to say, Noah, and let's say the manager has a lot of those connections with you in terms of similarities. I go to my manager and I don't have anything in common with my manager. And the manager looks at my data and says, your numbers don't suggest that you work well in a hybrid or remote area.
Right.
You need the structure. You need the discipline of coming into the office and look at your dashboard. This is what I'm basing my decision on. It's not that, Drew and I are Orioles fans, or it's not that we both like cycling, or we're both basketball fans, or we have kids on the same soccer team. It has nothing to do with it. It's data driven. And then I can see the data. And how do I argue with my manager's decision based on, well, look at Drew's data and look at your data. So Drew's a candidate. Now, come back to me in 6 months, come back to me in 9 months. And if your numbers are different, we'll have a different discussion. Right. But we'll have that discussion based on data. And that's the importance. It's not just knee jerk, sure, Drew, you can work from remote, and no, you can't. Because then I go home and I'm thinking, well, why does he get to do it and I don't? Yeah. And instead of knowing why Drew was able to do it and knowing why I wasn't the strongest candidate for hybrid work. So, using real life examples of how data, timely, actionable data, again, back to the monthly frequency, because if you showed consistency 9 months ago, but I couldn't verify it today when I'm making the decision as to who's working in a hybrid capacity, again, it influences all of your employees thinking, well, okay, it's just because the manager likes Drew more, instead of showing the data. And again, and the timeliness of data can't be stressed enough when the human brain, as I said earlier, only remembers things accurately for 6 to 8 weeks. So at the very least, gather data on a 6 week cycle, so that's genuine and real.
Right, not a 6 month cycle or a 1 year cycle, but that's huge. I mean, and just to go back to the attorney background we're talking about here, right?
Yeah,
that minimizes risk as well, right? Because you have someone, the example you just gave, in so many examples of like, oh, this person's getting preferential treatment because of X reason, right? And it's discriminatory. It's not fair. It's it's something where I'm a protected class or whatever. I'm going to see things through that lens, right? Yep. And now I'm going to be like, well, I'm going to go to the EEOC about this. I'm going to talk to them about this. And you have no data to back it up. Well, now you're like, well, look, his performance is different from me. If I'm this guy's performance over here. Okay, how do you know that? Well, I've seen it. Okay, show
And is
me.
that based on objective, actual information? And
Right.
you can't then construct a case or a defense on the last 3 years of data because you don't have the data. You have knee-jerk gut reactions that you had at a conference table once a year for 20 minutes.
But what you do have is you have
Whereas when you have
employees.
Ripple
Right.
or some form of data collection platform, you get that letter from the EEOC or the labor lawyer or whatever letter you might get, and you hand that off as a manager, as an owner of a company. You hand that off to your attorney, and the attorney sends back a letter with the attached reports for the last 2.5 years.
Yep.
And this is why Drew was terminated, not because we were discriminatory, because he was a toxic influence in our office, and we had multiple discussions about changing his attitude, the way he interacts with people, and he wouldn't do it. One last example. The hybrid component, which is a very real, obviously a very real topic being discussed in a lot of organizations. You can find data that supports that Noah doesn't play well with others in the office, right? But Noah can sell anything to anyone. He's a great salesperson, but he's not a very good coworker.
Yeah.
So you use that data in terms of how Noah interacts with his coworkers. Cooperation scores are down. And you put Noah on an island. You give him $500 a month to get his own office in his hometown where he doesn't commute in, and he sells because that's what he's good at. He's not a great coworker, but he can sell anything. So take that data, sit down with Noah, say, we're going to give you a raise because we're not going to need your office anymore. The overhead of you coming into the office, and we're going to give you $300, $500, whatever it is, stipend. Go find your own office and sell our stuff, because you know it and I know it, that you're not a great coworker, and you've been looking at your data for the last couple of years. So this shouldn't be a shock to you. One of the things that we also try to level set is the expectations of that annual compensation discussion. I didn't mention earlier, most annual reviews are tied to compensation. Mm-hmm. So if you think about a 25, 28, 30-year-old employee, you may be having the greatest conversation as a leader, as a manager you can possibly have with this person, giving him or her or they that great advice about professional goals and aspirations and how you achieve that stuff. The person's only listening to the end of that discussion because you're going to say, I'm giving you a $10,000 raise and a 3%, 4%, 8% raise. I'm sorry, 8% raise and a $10,000 bonus, right? That's, blah, 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 and then the money. So if you can have those discussions based on data throughout the year, and then once you have that annual, compensation discussion, the expectations of the people, the knowledge of having tracked their data over the last year, when you have that compensation discussion, you're not shocked. I'm not sure if you've ever administered an annual review. I used to do dozens a year, and you'd have these people sit across from you, and they think they're rock stars. Meanwhile, you're thinking, maybe I have to let this person go. Yeah. And so the level sets, good and bad, because if I, as a manager, want to minimize compensation, but your scores are super high, when I say, hey, Drew, we'd love to give you more money, but because you just looked at your dashboard, your numbers, your data is great. You're an asset, you're a rock star, you're a tremendous resource for those managers. You have the ability to push back and say, well, from lunch discussions with Noah yesterday, I know we got the same raise, and I know Noah's not the same employee as I am. Yeah. And you either push back and you ask for more, or worse yet, because it's never been easier to find a new job, you go get another job. And so then as a manager, what I've done is I've crippled the organizational health, because I've lost Drew, who was an asset. I've lost him, and now I have to replace him. And the risk of replacement is always, are you getting the same quality? Which, if you lost an asset, to replace an asset with an asset is very difficult. Yep. And you have the risk that person isn't going to work well with others on the team. So, it empowers both sides of the equation. And it's a refreshing concept in 2023, where you can sit and have a meaningful discussion, hopefully 4, 5, 8, 10 discussions throughout the year. So then when the compensation discussion happens, that the numbers are rooted in objective information. So we're trying to really create an environment where managers are more effective. Employees realize that what they do and how they do it is important and has a cumulative impact on the workplace. And really just make the workplace a better place to work. And maybe that's our new Maybe that's our new mantra. And
Make
you
the
know,
workplace a better place to work.
yeah, and the fact of the matter is, if you have people that want to work with their coworkers, you know, attrition, retention, however, whatever side you want to come from that angle, it's a huge issue. You know, the
Oh, yeah.
Great Resignation is a concept because people are losing good people. If the
Yeah.
Great Resignation had all of your bad people resigning, it wouldn't have a moniker. It would not.
Yeah.
People would be happy if you
Right.
could tell a leader of an organization with 100 employees that they're 20, you know, slouches, the 20 clock punchers, they're all going to quit tomorrow. Most organizations would be like, good, I don't have to worry about them. Yeah. So the Great Resignation is only because you're losing good people. What we can do and what we strive to do is to help managers keep good people.
Yeah, I love that, man. And what you mentioned is even just typically the iceberg in terms of what it costs to replace that person, right?
Oh.
That asset. I mean, you're talking about if let's say you bring someone that's the same day or the next day, you're talking about 6 months at least of ramping up time, getting used to the organization, meeting all the people they have to work with, understanding the background of everything that is involved in that job. So they're going to be essentially useless for 6 months at least, maybe even 9 months, depending on the role, right? They've made the connections and make sure that they have everything they need to do to get things done. They have to pay the salary to replace that person. It's probably going to be higher than the last person's salary, to be honest with you, to attract the right talent.
Yep.
Right. And then the rest of that person might end up leaving too, because on top of that, the rest of the team who saw when that asset left, right? That's
they start looking.
Impact. Yeah, they have, that's a human impact, and they're like, well, shit, Noah's gone. He did most of the work, and he did amazing work. I don't want to have to saddle all that myself. So I'm going to start looking around.
Worse yet, you have 6, 7 people on your team. You lose an asset. Drew leaves for greener pastures, and then he actually finds it, right? Mm-hmm. The other 2, 3 high-performing people, most teams don't have 7 high-performing people, right? No. If you have 7 people, you probably have 2 or 3 high-performing, couple clock punchers, and then 2 or 3 middle-of-the-ground resources, we like to call them, right?
Right.
So Drew leaves, he's an asset. Noah remains with 5 other teammates. Noah's an asset. Noah's talking to Drew. Hey, let's get a beer next Friday. Hey, you guys hiring? Yeah, I love it. Noah, this is that. You're going to love it. Let me get your resume. So I clock out. I'm done, right? I quit. 2 weeks later, suddenly as a manager, I had 2 assets, 2 resources, and 2 clock punchers. Now I have 2 resources, 2 clock punchers. So where's the slack getting pulled in, right? These people they weren't pulling their fair share when Drew and Noah were there. Drew and Noah are no longer there. That team is probably irreparable. Yeah, the damage is probably irreparable. And then to your point, the risk of hiring someone new who you don't know what you're getting, the onboarding process of 6 months. And as you know, I love stats. I think nothing drives home ROI than stats. 6 months of onboarding, half of millennials, 50%, half of your millennials and Gen Zers quit their jobs within 2.5 years. So that's 6 month process of onboarding to get 18 months of return or a year of return. Maybe.
Yeah.
It used to be back in the old days, I'll get all old timey. It used to be that you gave your employer a year or 2, even if you were miserable, to kind of work through. Right. You're lucky if you get a week or 2. People, if they're unhappy, they're gone. You'll be lucky if you get a 2-week notice.
And if you bring an asset into a team full of clock punchers and middle and resources, they're going to see that in the first couple weeks, and they're going to
start looking. It's never been easier to find new work. If you're an asset, if you're a high performing employee, it's never been easier. Online, I mean, again, dating myself, when I got out of law school, applying to jobs, you had to get your resume, you had to get your cover letter, you had to get a fax cover sheet. I mean, no joke. And finding a job, sending out 100 resumes was a couple weeks worth of work. Now it's 30 minutes on Indeed. I mean, and chances are you're going to go on LinkedIn, you're going to go on Glassdoor, and you're going to have more information on the company that might say, come in for an interview, and you'll say, no, thanks. I mean, if you see the reviews on Glassdoor and you're like, why would I come interview for a job I will not take? I mean, and then you get the productivity lag, because once I start looking for a job, if I'm an asset, I'm not 100%, 110% performing anymore. I'm 80%. Right. So then I'm falling back with those 4 or 5 other people who are basically collecting the check. The quiet quitting. I love these. I love how everyone has to have an expression for everything. Those were just called clock punchers when I was younger, right? I mean, the people that did the bare minimum to collect a check. That is nothing new to organizational dysfunction.
No.
They've always had them. It's getting rid of them. It's locating, identifying, and getting rid of those people. The quiet quitting is in my humble opinion, not a new phenomenon that just happened during COVID.
It's not at all.
It's been there forever.
The name is new. The name is
yes, yes. And then and then the whole paranoia about people working hybrid. If you think someone's on the couch eating cereal, watching SportsCenter all day, right, not doing their job, that same person, if they're at their office, that same person is setting their fantasy football lineup. That same person
is watching SportsCenter just on a work computer.
Yeah, exactly. and you're paying the overhead at X number per square foot for that office. So, pivot with the realities of today, and Ripple, we are the modern solution to the antiquated process, just to round it out, from starting with the annual review, the hatred of the annual review, and ending with the hatred of the annual review. The annual review started back in the 40s when soldiers were coming back from World War II. If you're doing anything in 2023 based on a process that was developed out in 1945, I mean, we have it on our explainer video. You don't ride a horse to work anymore. You don't use a beeper. You don't use a typewriter. Ripple's a technologically advanced solution to a pain point that most organizations have. And by the way, when I speak to a prospect and they love their talent assessment process, I go like this: good, continue doing it. As long as you love it, and as long as it's productive, as long as it's an effective means to an end, God bless. I'll go talk to somebody else.
It works for you. It works for you. That's great. But there's like 80% of people out there it doesn't work for, and more. Again, like I said, that's just 80% reporting. Doesn't work for them, right? 80% of people that they can report that, and that 20% is I guarantee it's more like
skewed.
10.
Yep. Yeah. Agreed.
So that's awesome, man. I mean, there's so much utility behind this. There's so much possibilities behind this. So I hope you get some folks who reach out to you, and if you are interested in what Noah's talking about, revolutionizes this whole process to make it actually effective. I wouldn't say more effective, because it's not effective at all right now.
Right.
So if you make it actually effective, and make it into a conversation, which is what's happening, that's something to talk to Noah about. I know before we go, it's got the one question I ask everyone before you hop off here, because it's been an awesome conversation and I wish we could continue. Maybe we'll do a part 2 another time, but
let's do it.
For you personally, what's been the biggest influence on you, whether it's a book, a person, a TV, movie show, whatever? What's been movie show? I don't know what that is.
I don't need a moving picture, like from
moving picture. Yeah,
1920s.
What's been a good moving picture that has influenced you?
So I'm going to answer that in two answers, 2 parts. The first, I mean, obviously I've read a ton of books over time. More recently, I read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, who obviously is the founder of Nike. Anyone who's out there who's an entrepreneur at heart, whether you're actually acting on it or not, it's a great book. It shows the trials and tribulations. If you don't know the story behind Phil Knight, it's an easy read. It's fun, and it also gives perspective to anyone that starts out, that it's hard. It's you're going to fail more times than you succeed, and you got to stick with your vision, your passion, and the goals you set reasonable goals and achieve them. All too often I think people set ridiculous goals that when they fail, they're disappointed that they failed, but the chances of them succeeding was slim to none to begin with. So Shoe Dog by Phil Knight came out a few years ago. It's impactful. And then I'm going to share the second prong of my answer is, I won't use his name because he was a prior employer of mine, but he was such a negative influence in me. He pushed me to be a better person, a better lawyer at the time, a better coworker, a better leader. And while short term it sucked, because working for this guy was just a complete nightmare, he gave me the skill set to identify those types of people, avoid them at all costs, and really grow from the lack of leadership he showed over a several year tenure with his company. I helped manage his firm for a long time. And, I'll share one story, and then I guess we're coming to the end. He was the typical, he was a typically broken leader who learned from somebody 20 years earlier who led horribly. He asked me to go out and talk to the people and see when they wanted to do the weekly meeting, right? That great concept, get everyone around a table for the sake of getting around a table, not to, discuss anything specific. So I found out that they wanted to meet Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday sometime in the afternoon. Went back to him, told him the information, and he said, okay, we're going to meet at 9 a.m. on Monday. So the exercise of me asking for feedback, getting opinions, getting information, specific information as to when they wanted this meeting, he disregarded and never really, in my heart, intended on following unless they came in and said, yeah, we want to meet at 9 a.m. on Monday.
Right.
The moral of the story is don't ask for feedback if you're not going to use it. Ripple,
100%.
we do not want you to ask your people for meaningful information if you don't have any plans on using it in a meaningful way. So don't be my old boss. You gather information, have meetings for reasons, purpose-driven meetings. Don't have meetings because you need a weekly meeting because you read some book somewhere, Six Sigma or whatever misguided leadership model you adopted. Have meetings because you need to have meetings to accomplish something. That's my last bit of advice.
Love that, dude.
At least for now.
No, at least for this conversation. Maybe next time we'll have more, right? No, that's awesome. I love it. Thanks so much for sharing everything, honestly. And what I took from that last story is that there are occasionally bad leaders in law firms.
Yeah, just occasionally. Just occasionally. Very rare, but sometimes it happens.
Yeah. No, that's great, man. And I love the work that you're doing. Please keep doing it. And let me know how I can obviously support you guys. Anyone who wants to at least talk about changing the way that you do annual reviews or changing the way your HR works, talk to Noah, reach out to him. His information is going to be in the description box below. Please reach out. If you have questions, please reach out to me, reach out to him. A lot of his work does coincide with coaching and the work that I do. So that's why we ended up connecting. And Noah, I'm here to support you. And I appreciate the work you're doing. Thanks so much, man.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Take care, everybody. Stay safe.